when a group of fake homeowner association cops showed up at my door saying I was violating community regulations, I knew something was off. With fake badges and a lot of confidence, they tried to detain me in my own backyard. The problem? I'm the real town marshal, and now, these fools are about to find out the hard way that they messed with the wrong person. I always knew that the homeowner association in my neighborhood was a bunch of maniacs with too much free time and not enough productive things to do. A bunch of sheriff-like residents who think they're the judge, jury, and executioner of anyone who doesn't follow the ridiculous rules they make up. They'd targeted me before, about the height of my fence, the color of my door, and even the way I parked my truck. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for what happened that morning. I was having my coffee quite peacefully when I saw a group of people standing outside in the reflection of the window. There were 4 figures standing on my sidewalk, all wearing matching polo shirts, sunglasses, and an air of authority that looked like it had been bought at a clearance sale. One of them was holding a notepad. Another had a toy radio strapped around her waist, and the icing on the cake was the woman in the middle with short dyed hair, her arms crossed, and an expression like she'd just sniffed a bottle of vinegar. Karen. She stood out as the leader of the group, as if she were the general of an army of fools. I took a deep breath, took the last sip of my coffee, and went to answer the door. Before I had fully opened it, she started talking as if she were giving a public announcement. You are in serious violation of homeowner association rules, and we are here to take action. I stared at the woman, expecting a hidden camera. Was this a joke? What did she want now? Before I could say anything, she pulled out a piece of plastic and shoved it in my face. You are under investigation for numerous infractions, including the unauthorized painting of your garage, the presence of an unregistered vehicle on your property, and she paused dramatically as if about to accuse me of a crime. Inappropriate behavior towards members of the community. I had to hold back a chuckle. The garage had been exactly the same color since I moved in. The unregistered vehicle was my perfectly legal truck parked in my own lot. And inappropriate behavior. In other words, I simply declined to attend the boring and useless homeowner association meetings. That's where the unbelievable part came in. Because you refused to heed previous warnings, the homeowner association is exercising its right to civil custody, and we're here to take you into custody until the matter is resolved. Detention? I blinked a few times, trying to absorb what she was saying. You want to detain me? Karen puffed out her chest as if she were about to receive a medal for bravery. The homeowner association has full authority over this neighborhood. The other 3 fools nodded in sync, as if they were a choir of well-trained parrots. And that's when I realized the level of delusion. They really thought they had the power to arrest someone. Little did they know, I'm a town marshal, not a mall security guard, not a neighborhood volunteer. I'm a real deputy with a badge, a gun, and a good dose of patience. For this kind of stupidity, kept my cool, and decided to play the game for a moment. Interesting, I said, feigning consideration. And how exactly do you intend to detain me? Karen pointed to one of the thugs, a man with a beer belly and a t-shirt that looked 2 sizes smaller than it should have been. He pulled a pair of plastic restraints from his pocket. Plastic. We have our ways, he said, trying to sound intimidating. It was official. The circus was set up on my doorstep. I took a deep breath, stepped back, and in one swift movement pulled my wallet out of my pocket, opening it to display my shining badge. Karen's smile vanished faster than a Black Friday deal. Good to know. You think you can make arrests? I said in the most serious voice I could manage. Because at the moment you're committing a series of crimes, including impersonation of a law enforcement officer and attempted abduction. The silence was immediate. Karen's eyes widened. Her henchmen looked at each other, and for the first time, they realized they had been challenging the wrong person. What are you suggesting? The woman stammered, her confidence crumbling like a house of cards in a storm. I crossed my arms. I'm suggesting that unless you disappear from my property in the next 5 seconds, I'm going to arrest you for real. Silence. Sweat started Running down one of the guy's temples, Karen's hand trembled slightly as she still clutched the laminated paper, and then, like a bunch of rats fleeing a sinking ship, they began to take steps backwards, mumbling weak excuses. "It's not over yet," Karen shouted before spinning on her heels and disappearing with her pathetic followers. I watched as they walked away, feeling a mixture of amusement and disbelief. What the hell had just happened? But deep down, I knew this story was far from finished. If I thought that ridiculous arrest scene was the end of the nonsense, I was very much mistaken. I knew stubborn people, but Karen and her followers took it to an almost artistic level. Normal people would accept defeat and move on with their lives. But not this woman. Not only did she not surrender, she decided to double her efforts. The first retaliation came the next day. When I went out to take out the garbage, I realized that my cans were missing. They had simply disappeared. There was no sign of them on the sidewalk or on the side of the house. I looked around, and of course, I saw Karen on the other side of the street, standing with her arms crossed, looking like she thought she was the ruler of the neighborhood. When our eyes met, she made sure to let out a satisfied little grin before entering the house. I took a deep breath and tried to ignore it, but then when I got to my mailbox, I found an envelope with the Homeowner Association stamp on it. I opened it, knowing that there was going to be nonsense, and I wasn't disappointed. A list of penalties because, according to them, I was in violation of community regulations. Among the absurd claims, they said I was prohibited from using the waste disposal services, could no longer park my car in the garage, and had to attend a mandatory meeting to discuss my inappropriate behavior. I took the paper and tore it in half right there, letting the pieces fall to the ground. If Karen wanted to provoke me, she was going to have to try harder. But of course, she had other tactics up her sleeve. That afternoon, I went out to handle some tasks, and when I came back, I found an orange cone in the middle of my driveway. Next to it, there was a plastic notice stuck to a piece of wood as if it were an official notification. It said that my garage was closed by order of the Homeowner Association. It was the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. How can someone have the nerve to ban someone else's garage? I went over there, tore off the paper, and unceremoniously tossed the cone onto the sidewalk. And across the street, I saw two of Karen's lackeys watching. One of them was holding a notebook, writing down who knows what. Maybe owner removing cone improperly, as if they were serious officials and not to fools playing inspectors. It wasn't even 2 minutes before Karen appeared. "You can't remove that." I looked at her holding the cone as if it were a dangerous weapon. "Oh, can't I? In my own house?" She pointed at the laminated paper, her face already turning red with frustration. "This is a homeowner association sanction. You can't just ignore community regulations." I took a deep breath so as not to mock her. "Karen, you don't have the authority to ban my garage. In fact, you have no power to do anything but irritate me." She widened her eyes in disbelief, but before she could reply, I went into the house and shut the door. But the story wasn't over yet. The next day, while I was at the police station, I got a call from one of the few neighbors who wasn't part of this insane homeowner association cult. He sounded a bit uneasy. "Dude, the police are in front of your house." I stopped what I was doing. Doing 2 cars, they said. Said they'd received a complaint about a man with a gun on your property. That's when I understood Karen had escalated. She called the police and made up a story to get me in trouble. I took my car and drove straight home. When I arrived, I saw the 2 policemen talking to Karen, who was playing her best victim role. Her attitude was that of someone deeply concerned about the safety of the community. If I hadn't known she was a manipulator, I would have believed it. I got out of the car and the police recognized me on the spot. I knew them both. Honest, decent guys, and I could tell by the look on their faces that they knew they were there for a waste of time. "Oops, boss," one of them said, a little awkwardly. "We've received a report of suspicious activity involving a man with a gun at this residence." I looked straight at Karen. "I bet the report came from this lady here, huh?" She tried to disguise it by putting her hand on her chest. "I only reported what I heard. Some people saw a suspicious movement and got anxious." The policemen exchanged glances. Already exhausted, one of them sighed and turned to me. Well, since there's no real threat, we'll register it as a hoax. But, Miss Karen, just for the record, making false reports can get you into a lot of trouble. Her face turned red. For the first time, she looked really unsettled. She opened her mouth to argue, but gave up and just crossed her arms, furious. The policeman left, and I stood there looking at Karen. She looked at me too, without saying anything. For the first time, felt that she really understood that she was playing with danger, but I knew she hadn't surrendered yet. She was going to try something worse, and I couldn't wait to see how far this woman would go before she completely ruined herself. I already knew that Karen wasn't the type to surrender easily, but after the police prank disaster, anyone with a shred of dignity would have stuck their head in a hole and stayed quiet. Not this woman. For her, losing was not an option. If the attempt to arrest me with plastic restraints and the false complaint didn't work, it was obvious that she had a plan C, and that plan began to appear the very next morning. I was woken up by the sound of a heavy truck stopping right in front of my house. Still a little groggy, I went to the window and saw a team of uniformed workers stepping off the vehicle, equipped with excavators, shovels, and a bunch of orange cones. They looked ready to start some major excavation work. My first thought was that they were at the wrong address. But then I saw Karen on the other side of the street with her arms crossed and a satisfied little grin, as if she had just pulled a loose thread and was about to watch my world collapse. I went downstairs, still in my pajamas, opened the door, and went over to the workers. One of them, who looked like the team supervisor, turned to me with a clipboard in his hand. "Good morning, sir. We're going to start repairs on the underground pipelines." I looked like I didn't understand anything. "What repairs?" "We received a request from the residents committee informing us that there was a water leak on this property." I glanced at Karen, who pretended to be admiring a plant. "Let me guess. The work order was signed by a certain Karen." The man flipped through the papers and nodded. "Yes, the order came from Karen Thompson, president of the Homeowner Association." Karen, that menace, had arranged to have my entire yard dug up for a leak that didn't exist. I took a deep breath so as not to tell everyone to leave at once. "Look, buddy, there's no leak here. Neither you nor the Homeowner Association are authorized to touch anything, so you can gather up your equipment and turn around." The guy hesitated, looking at his team as if waiting for some confirmation. "Well, sir, the thing is, we're already here, and now you're leaving." He opened his mouth to argue, but then I showed him my badge. The effect was instant. He widened his eyes, swallowed nervously, and turned to the staff. "Right, guys, let's pack it up." The workers started collecting the tools, and Karen came marching towards me like an out-of-control train. "You can't do this." I raised an eyebrow. "Do what?" "Stop them from destroying my yard for no reason. The Homeowner Association has authority over the neighborhood's infrastructure, and I have the authority to arrest you for trespassing and deception." Her mouth opened and closed a few times like a fish out of water. For the first time, she seemed genuinely startled. "But don't worry," the woman recovered quickly. "You're disrespecting the neighborhood. That's not how a responsible resident behaves." I took a step forward, lowering my voice just to see the color drain from her face. "And you're interfering where you shouldn't be." Karen didn't reply. She just threw her hands up in the air, groaned, and walked back into the house, stomping on the floor like a spoiled child. But of course, she wasn't going to stop there. The eviction attempt. The following week, I received a letter from the Homeowner Association saying that my house was under disciplinary review and that my behavior was harming the stability of the community. Basically, it was their elaborate way of saying that they were trying to expel me. That's right. This insane woman wanted me out of my own home. According to the letter, I had accumulated several severe infractions and was openly challenging the authority of the Homeowner Association. Therefore, my presence was no longer welcome, and they were taking measures to revoke my residency in the neighborhood. I had to laugh loudly. The Homeowner Association didn't have the slightest power to do that. They didn't own my house. They had no control over the mortgage, and they couldn't just decide that I couldn't live there anymore. But it seemed Karen thought they did. To make matters worse, some of the neighbors began to look down on me, clearly influenced by the defamation campaign this woman had organized against me. From one moment to the next, I had become the neighborhood's public enemy number one, the troublesome guy, the rebel who was defying the sacred order of the homeowner association. It got to such a ridiculous point that one day when I went to the supermarket, a neighbor who barely interacted with me approached me and said in the tone of someone who is passing on first-hand rumors, "You know, some people are thinking that you really don't belong here very well. Maybe you should consider relocating." I gave a fake smile. Some people should worry more about their own affairs. She blushed and slipped away. The meeting of shame. This disciplinary meeting was scheduled for a Friday evening. I went just for the satisfaction of seeing Karen fail live. The community room was packed. The neighbors sitting in chairs, lined up like a courtroom. Karen was there at the front with a pile of documents on the table, clearly ready to publicly attack me. She sniffed and began to speak with that tone of a kindergarten teacher explaining rules to children. "We're here to discuss the highly problematic behavior of the gentleman who refuses to cooperate with the community." I rolled my eyes. "Cut the nonsense, Karen. Do you want to expel me from the neighborhood?" She tried to disguise it, but the truth was obvious. "Well, considering the number of violations I've accumulated." I leaned forward. "What violations exactly?" "Attempted kidnapping, lying to the police, unauthorized excavation in my yard." She turned red but tried to continue. "The point is," I raised my hand, interrupting. "The point is that the homeowner association has no authority to remove anyone from here. This isn't a private community, Karen. You're not the sheriff. And this meeting means absolutely nothing." The silence was absolute. Some neighbors looked at each other as if realizing this for the first time. Karen opened her mouth, closed it, and then tried to laugh as if it was nothing. "This is absurd. You simply don't belong in our community." I crossed my arms. "Yeah, I think I'm going to continue not fitting in because I'm not going anywhere." She glared at me, her face burning with frustration, but she knew she had lost. Except Karen wasn't the kind of person who accepted defeat. And I knew she still had one last dirty trick up her sleeve. I'd seen Karen try to arrest me, dig up my yard, accuse me of false violations, and even try to force me out of her own neighborhood. Every time I thought she'd reached the peak of madness, she'd find a way to surpass herself. And after the public humiliation she took at the homeowner association meeting, I knew this woman was going to retaliate with everything. And she did. This time, it wasn't a ridiculous letter, a cone in my driveway, or a false complaint. This time, Karen decided to play dirty for real. The week after the meeting, I woke up to the unpleasant sound of sirens. Outside my house, I glanced out of the window and to my surprise saw two county enforcement vehicles parked outside, and of course, on the other side of the street. There she was, pretending she was just observing the scene, but with the same satisfied grin. As always, Karen had called the authorities on me. I went downstairs and opened the door before the inspectors even knocked. One of them, a middle-aged man with a notepad in his hand, looked at me with an air of forced professionalism and got straight to the point. "Sir, we've received a complaint about multiple structural violations in this property. We're going to need to conduct a full inspection." I looked confused. "Violations?" "Yes. According to the report, this residence has unauthorized modifications, irregular plumbing, and a possible pest problem." Now, I wanted to laugh. Karen was no longer playing games just to annoy me. She was trying to get the authorities to literally condemn my house. I leaned against the door frame, looking at the inspector. "And who made this complaint?" The guy hesitated for a moment before answering. "Well, the homeowner association officially filed the complaint." Of course, it was the homeowner association. And of course, Karen was behind it. "Okay, so let's go," I said, opening the door and gesturing for them to enter. "Do the inspection." The inspector looked at me in disbelief. He probably expected me to resist, but I was calm, because, unlike Karen, I wasn't doing anything illegal. My house was completely up to standard. They spent almost 2 hours inspecting everything, measuring walls, checking pipes, looking inside cupboards, and taking photographs. All the while, Karen and some of her followers stood outside waiting for confirmation that I was doomed. When the inspectors had finished, one of them, a younger guy, came over to talk to me. "So, sir, we did the full inspection and found none of the violations mentioned in the complaint. Your property complies with all county laws." I tried to hold back my laughter, but it was impossible. "So you mean the complaint was completely baseless?" The inspector scratched his head, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "Well, technically, yes." I smiled and crossed my arms. "Good, because I'm going to file a formal complaint against the homeowner association for harassment and misuse of public resources." Now, Karen got uneasy. She came marching towards me before the inspectors had even left. "You're overreacting. It was just safety procedure." I rolled my eyes. "A safety procedure, eh? Strange, because the inspectors said my house was flawless. So either you lied or you're terrible at inspecting anything." She gritted her teeth and looked at the inspectors as if she expected them to defend her, but they both just shrugged, clearly having no patience for this nonsense. She tried to argue some more, but I was already calling the inspection department to formalize my complaint against her when she realized that this could turn into a real issue. Karen finally backed down. "This isn't over yet," she grumbled before stomping off. But lucky for her, it was over. Over the next few days, Karen's situation only got worse. The complaint I'd made against the homeowner association was taken seriously, mainly because this wasn't the first time they'd received complaints about their bullying tactics. They began to investigate, and with that, other stories began to surface. They discovered that Karen was fining residents without reason, just to raise money for the association's important events, which were basically parties for her and her friends. She had also hired unverified contractors to do maintenance in common areas and misused some of the money. The icing on the cake, she wasn't even supposed to be president of the homeowner association. The rules said that anyone in office had to be re-elected annually, but she simply never organized the vote. She stayed in power because no one had the patience to challenge her. Until now, a special meeting was called to decide the future of the homeowner association, and Karen was there trying to defend herself. But the situation was already spiraling out of control. Most of the residents were outraged at having been manipulated. The people who had once followed her were now clearly stepping away, realizing that they had been deceived. The final blow came when a county auditor was called in to review the homeowner association's finances. The guy revealed that more than $30,000 was unaccounted for. That was enough to bring Karen down for good. The homeowner association board voted unanimously to remove her from office immediately. She still tried to argue, threatened to sue everyone, but no one would listen. And then finally, the police were called. She tried to sneak out, but two officers blocked her at the door. As the real handcuffs were placed on her wrists, I heard one of the residents let out a loud "Well done, Karen." The self-proclaimed ruler of the neighborhood was escorted away like a felon. After Karen vanished off the map, the homeowner association underwent a major transformation. Rules were relaxed, unfair fines were revoked, and the new board ensured that no one would ever again have complete authority over the residents. The funniest thing, a few weeks later, I found out that Karen had tried to appeal in court, but to no success. She had to sell the house and relocate. They say she went to a place where nobody knows her, probably planning to restart her little empire of domination in another neighborhood. But here, peace has finally returned. And to be honest, it's never been so satisfying to see a vacancy for sale on that street. Did you like this video? Then don't forget to subscribe to the channel.